Welcome back to the 241st episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including the obsession with the racial realignment on the conservative right, a interesting article talking about some of the CPAC speakers and how they want to end democracy, and then a quick story about Trump and the merger that is going to make him a lot of money. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. So, we've talked about this topic before, the racial realignment, the group realignment, the intersectional realignment, blah, 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 blah. At what point, and I know, maybe that was a little loud, a little frustrated, but at what point are both sides going to get over this intersectional coalition, blah, 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 blah? I understand that it's important to break down what side, what group, what subgroup, what things you need to target in order to win, so that it's never really going to go away. But when are we going to fully stop looking at these things in terms of sexes, races, college degrees? I don't think we ever will, but is there a possible way where it doesn't matter? Maybe if we start looking at these different groups and we say, okay, actually now it's about 50-50, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. There are other characteristics that we need to focus on in order to court these particular voters into our side of the aisle. Maybe that's when they don't matter. Maybe that's when people will overlook them. But at the end of the day, this is a nation made up of individuals. And yes, I know, there's about 330 million. I believe that's the current population number. I normally state that it's 3,028,000, like 328 million more or less. But now it's, I think it's gone up a little bit. But my point being, there's a lot of individuals that we need to talk to. Maybe you should actually go out and lead on issues rather than trying to go out there and court on issues. Maybe that's just the way that it should be, because when you're trying to subdivide and say, this group here, we need to go for this different demographic, you're actually chasing the people rather than leading the people. Maybe that's a foreign concept. At the end of the day, I don't think you'll be gone, but do you think we can get past it? Do you ever think we can get to the place where it is no longer going after who you want, but rather bringing them underneath your umbrella with your message? Maybe not, but is it too much to ask to want to get there? And if you think there's anybody that could do it in modern politics, who do you think it is? I'd love to hear everybody's opinions, but that's enough. I've gone on a long rant on that one. Let's jump into our first article that comes from the Washington Examiner. Quote, "The racial realignment is a humiliation for white liberals." And like I said, Washington Examiner leans pretty conservative, and we've seen lots of different articles like this coming out recently. And this is because Donald Trump is trending upward with the Hispanic voters. He is trending upward with black voters. I don't think he's trending upward with women voters. I don't know the numbers for Asian voters, and maybe they're excluded from this one specifically because they're not trending up. Therefore, it doesn't actually prove the Washington Examiner's points. But my question would be, why do we keep obsessing? Maybe because they feel as though this is a pressure point. They feel as though, and let's be clear, I'm not saying they're just agents. I'm not saying they're just agents of the Republican Party. They're just agents of the conservative movement. I'm not trying to call them out and be like, they're only doing this for blah, blah, blah. There's a genuine intrigue on one side of the aisle. I'm trying to examine why that is the case. Maybe because it shows cracks in Biden's outward facade. Maybe it is a way to highlight a broader point in their mind, which is what I think they may actually be getting at here, that this idea of intersectionality isn't working out for the left. That the idea that, hey, we're just going to hobble together this coalition of the oppressed or a coalition of minorities. It's not actually working out for one side of the aisle. And then they go on to explain it and say, this is what's happening currently. But at the same time, they're falling into this exact same idea of, I don't want to say that basing everything off of intersectionality. I think that's a little too simple, but they're still falling for this same game where they're just doing the math for different subgroups of the American people and trying to identify where they can actually use their leverage in order to get their way. They're actually falling into the narrative of intersectionality. They're falling into this narrative of this is how we can divide the populace. And I'm not saying, oh, this is how we can actually go in and break them up and make them ours, but this is a good way, a actually important way to look at the electorate by dividing them by these groups. Because it does, at the end of the day, it does say something. If Biden doesn't get 90% of the black vote, it's going to be very hard for him to win. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean that we have to hyper obsess over it and then try to chase those voters. Mr. Trump, whoever it is on the top of the ballot, whether it be in Ohio, whether it be in Washington, whether it be in Virginia, at the end of the day, this sort of data it's natural. I'm not trying to hate on it, but it's going to make him pivot, especially Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a man who, he does have his convictions. He does lead on certain things, but also he tests things out at his rallies. He throws out different policy proposals, different language about how to talk about things. He'll take particular jabs. He'll say, oh, the crowd doesn't like that one. Oh, you guys don't like this. And he will adjust and adjust and adjust until it works out for him, until he gets the desirable result of being loved. So when you have advisors around him and an entire conservative media structure that is going to say, hey, look, you're cutting in here, here, and here, then he's going to chase those sort of voters because he's seeing progress, which I'm not saying you shouldn't chase those sort of voters for any particular reason. I'm not saying that you don't need to bring in as many people as possible. I'm saying in general, you don't want to chase voters. And by putting too much emphasis on one group over the other, then guess what? You're going to chase voters. If they put out polls that he is going to have a better time going after the suburban mom, and the suburban mom, we know, is afraid about crime, he is going to chase people on crime. Now, then again, and let's be clear, he's going to chase those voters by talking about his policies. He may even adjust his policies a little bit. He's moderated, or at least had to come out and clearly state a very moderate position on abortion, because I don't think he really cares. I'm going to be honest. I don't think Donald Trump gives two hoots about where that line is. I don't think he has a principled stance. He's trying to court the suburban moms, and he is chasing those people. If you do not have a strong principle on it, and you just have some idea of where people will be, sure, go along with that. But also, that doesn't mean that it needs to be the top of your ticket. It doesn't mean it needs to be an issue that you're going to lay out there. Even though I don't necessarily love politicians not having a clear message, I much prefer them clearly putting their hands up and saying, hey, I don't have a good idea on this one. I don't have a really principled stance on this one. I'm going to let the people who understand this a little bit more, who have a very principled stance, lead on this one. I would rather have them be the ones pushing for a certain policy than him trying to tiptoe and foot around and pull everybody else to where he is, because he's just trying to placate the moderates. And I think this goes for Joe Biden as well. There are certain policies where he is not a leader. He is not a person who actually has principles on certain matters. Sometimes that would be his environmental policies. I think maybe he cares a little bit now, but before I don't think he would have. Maybe, yes, leave that up to people who are more knowledgeable, who have a better understanding of certain things, who actually have a more principled stance. Leave that policy making to them rather than trying to court them with crazy things. He's also trying to do the same thing with Gaza. He has a very principled stance with Israel, but he's trying to let the Gaza contingent pull him in a particular direction. Hey, I'm not trying to deride. I'm just saying the people who support the Palestinian people more than the Israeli people, he's letting them drag him to the side rather than being a leader. They are both chasing demographics. And at the end of the day, I understand that's how politics works. That's how you have to win. But am I too highfalutin? Am I too principled based? Am I just too idealistic? Maybe. But at the end of the day, we need leaders. We do not need followers. We do not need people who just look at the polls and say, what will make me popular? We need people who will do the uncomfortable thing. We need leaders. We need people we trust to put into office to say, hey, sometimes I'm not going to agree with all of your policies. Sometimes I am not going to like what you are doing. But at the end of the day, I think that your judgment is good. That's why I put you into that place. And I trust that you're going to have our best interest at heart. Not just me, and let's be clear, not just me, but also the rest of the constituents. And that is what you need. Guess what? I'm reading a book. General Washington, Jefferson, Adams, whether you liked any of them, all of them had their principles. People believed in what they were saying. Some of them folded to certain things, maybe reworded a few things. I'm not going to deny that. But at the end of the day, a lot of these people never had direct contact. They didn't have polling information like they do now. They didn't have the ability to just say, oh, yeah, okay, hey, this issue is polling really well. No, they were leaders. They were people who had principles. And if the principles didn't work out and the people didn't like what happened, they got thrown out. Adams only got one term. Yeah, then again, he had some things that people really liked, but his own party turned against him. And yeah, I guess technically faction, whatever you want to call it. But his own party turned against him because of what he did. George Washington multiple times spurned people for telling him how to run his administration, even his own advisors, Hamilton and Jefferson, while they were both there. So my point is, these were great men. These were leaders. They were trusted by the people. And guess what? Sometimes they did things that made the people unhappy, but the populace realized, or at least the person did what they believed to be true, and the populace said, hey, I may not 100% agree, but I believe in your character and I believe in your principles. And maybe we're just past that. Maybe there's just too much information out there that allows us to just cater to everybody. Sure, maybe that is just how the system will work from now on, and it is just a hard and fast fact. But I hope that things can change. I hope that we can actually have a more principled system, and we don't have people just chasing these votes, and we don't have both sides falling into this subdivision of the populace. Who can we grab here? How can we message to them narrative? Rather, have principled stance. And let's be clear, I understand that in politics, sometimes you can't be 100% principled. Sometimes you do have to give here and there with different people within the administration, within the House, within the Senate. But in those cases, you're not giving up your principles in order to just get into power. You are altering what you're aiming for in order to reach those principles and get as much as you can and the best thing you can for the people, and getting those parts of those principles actually locked into government for the sake of the constituency that put you there. I think those are two very different situations. But hey, what am I? A young idealist? I know, like I've said before, I go back and forth between being a nihilist and an idealist, but there are two parts of me, or cynical, I should say, and a idealist. There are two parts of me that are almost always in conflict. When I look at politicians and politics in general, I'm pretty cynical. But when I look at our system, I want to be idealistic. I want to aspire to certain things, even if I do look at our system and say, wow, this is really screwed up. I think I had a good mix today. In the ideal world, I want our system to be at a certain level, but the practical part of me understands how it actually does work and is still yearning and pushing to get to that ideal standard. But maybe, like I said, I'm just young and dumb and I just don't understand anything. I'm sure that criticism will come eventually. At least, well, I actually have heard it multiple times while I've been out on the job. So let's jump to our second article that comes from commondreams.org, and the headline reads, "Which side are, quote, we the people on?" democracy or fascism. So this is an interesting article, and it's been I don't want to say a long time, it's been a few weeks since CPACT actually happened, but this article is talking about some very specific comments from Mr. Jack Posobiec at the CPAC convention. And one of the most controversial quotes that came out, and let's be clear, I don't watch mainstream media. I take that back. I do watch some mainstream media every once in a while when clips flow on in. If I'm ever just going to sit down at the TV, I probably try to watch a little bit of CNN just to see what everybody's saying over there. But I didn't realize that this clip had gone so viral in their world. I looked up after this quote in the article because I thought it was a little bit disingenuous. I was like, there's no way that I know Jack Posobiec. I've seen him on different libertarian podcasts. I've seen him in conservative stuff. I've seen him in middle of the road milquetoast stuff, aka Tim Pool. He was there for quite some time. And I know he's kind of a troll. So when I saw this quote attributed to him, I was like, okay, let's get the actual context. Then I went and looked up clips, and it was all over MSNBC, a few on CNN. I was like, okay, so wow, they really, really didn't like this. The quote goes like this: "Welcome to the end of democracy. We are here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on J6, but we endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this right here." And he raises up a cross. And it's a little bit of a troll, and I don't think that he is 100% serious when he says all of those things. I also do think that they leave out the context where he says that government is not all that there is. God is the true aim of our existence here on Earth, which I think provides a very specific context. The MSNBC hosts were saying, well, that actually means that he is a theologist, or I take that back. He wants to bring in theocracy, and he wants to make it so that we only hail God. And yeah, I think you could, if you didn't take the two things as separate, which maybe I'm giving him a whole bunch of credit here, maybe I'm being generous, the two things as separate as his sarcastic comments about what's going on within our nation, and oh, well, here we go again, trying to end democracy. He kind of has that snarky Posobiec kind of vibe. And then saying the other thing that he truly believes, which is government here is only a false kingdom, so to speak, if you had to attribute it to something like C.S. Lewis would say, which is these are only temporary kingdoms. The one of God is the true and eternal kingdom that we should be focused on. So if he actually holds that belief, Jack Posobiec, then those could be two separate statements. One where he's being snarky and one where he's being serious, that hey, we need to put our godliness back into the way that we operate within this world, and we need to worry about the kingdom after this one. You could attribute it all as one thing as well, and he really does want a theocracy to come in, because it's funny. The next line says, "The fanatic crowd erupts with glee." No, they really didn't. There was a little bit of ha ha ha, and the moderator was like, oh, ha ha ha. There wasn't this loud, woo, yeah, 100%, let's go. No, there was not that. It was a small conference room, it felt like, where they were doing a little panel, and people were kind of like, okay, I don't know how to take him. Some of them laughed, a few little claps were out there for sure, but erupted with glee? No. Okay, I think that's a little bit, I think the bias of the author is letting them jade them. Also, the bias of me could be jading me as well and giving him too much of a benefit of the doubt. But why is this important, Alex? You're just pointing out that maybe they're a little bit wrong, doing a little bit of extra work to see where this article was coming from. Sure, I'm doing all of those things. Why would I point this one out? Why would I think that this article is important? One, because I don't think it's 100% accurate, so we got to correct the record. But also, I think it once again highlights a very specific trend within our democracy. And wow, I just realized that I didn't really quote anything in that last article, except for a few of the statistics. So we're going to actually quote a little bit more from this article so you get an idea of what they're actually saying here. Quote, "For years, Americans have watched the troubling rise of the Tea Party." I'm sorry, but the Tea Party was a fiscally responsible, or at least a fiscally conservative party slash group of people within the legislator. The Tea Party was a problem? Really? I'm sorry, but they were not. They were not anywhere saying that hey, we need to be violent. If that's your idea, because he then lists MAGA Republicans, thinly veiled authoritarianism, fervent Christian nationalism, voter suppression, gerrymandering, blah 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 blah. I'm okay. If you want to have all of those in separate categories, I think maybe you could make an argument for the fervent Christian populace and some that are out there saying that, hey, America needs to come first and this is one of God's greatest countries. I've heard that message. I don't think it's Christian nationalism in the way that they probably mean it, but sure, you could make a semantics argument based on that one. Gerrymandering, that's something that both sides have done. There have been cases where it's proven that a Republican legislator was doing it and they had to have some of the maps redrawn. So sure, I guess if I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt, sure. Dark money, corruption. Dark money, corruption. Guess what? That's on both sides of the aisle. So sure, yeah, we can attribute that one for sure. Intolerance, that one a little bit. I don't necessarily know what you mean by that because a lot of people are intolerant nowadays. So give me a little bit more specifics here. International isolationism, yes, there's definitely one side that MAGA definitely likes that. The Republican Party is definitely leaning towards that in some sects of it. Idolatry of world dictators. That one's a little edgy. I don't really think that one makes much sense to me, but maybe they're talking about Orban. Even then, I don't really think a lot of Americans, especially Republicans and the laymen in the Republican Party, know Orban that well. That's kind of like a high-minded media talking point, maybe. Anti-regulation zealotry. Zealotry is a strong word, but yeah, there's lots of anti-regulation. I mean, Trump, when he was in office, he literally said, hey, I want to for every regulation that we put in, I want to actually repeal two. So yeah, I guess you could say that one. Self-interest over national interest. That one I have a hard time with. Contempt for civil rights and the rule of law. Once again, I don't know. Give me some more specific examples, and I'm not saying they're not there. I don't think of any right off the top of my head. Maybe I'm in my own bubble, though. Sure enough. Coercion, intimidation, repression, misogyny, homophobia, racism, it just goes on and on and on. It actually keeps on going and going and going for a whole freaking paragraph. So, sure, all of those things. Can you really relate that to the Tea Party? Like, you start on such a terrible note. You're saying that this is all the birthplace of the Tea Party, which, sure, maybe a lot of this stuff is actually born from the quote-unquote uprising of the Tea Party. I don't necessarily think that's the case. But the Tea Party were the fiscal conservatives who were trying to cut spending and be a block against Obama. I mean, at the end of the day, putting them in the camp with the rest of the stuff here, really, I just don't see it 100%. And throwing Make America Great Again solely into all these categories, maybe there are some sects of it, but it's a very wide umbrella. So I feel as though the author comes in with their slant, which is Republicans / modern republicanism / anything that is not the neoconservative middle of the road, let's everything just keep going, government is crucial to everybody's lives. Anything like that is not, acceptable in their worldview. Maybe I'm just wrong. And let's be clear, I understand that everybody can have their worldview. I prefer to say that I think a lot of progressive points, I listen to some of them, and I don't necessarily always agree with them. Some of the more isolationist points, I listen to them. I don't always agree with them. Some of the just mainstream liberal stuff, if I listen to it, I'm like, oh, okay, I hear some of your stuff. I don't agree with others. Some of the mainstream Republican, I hear some of your stuff. I don't agree with others. My point being, this author definitely comes in with anything that is not within my realm, not acceptable, versus maybe a little bit of open-mindedness would be nice. Maybe rather than trying to shoebox Jack Posobiec's comments, which, let's be clear, he is a troll. He is definitely someone who is out there on the right. But instead of just trying to completely lambast him and not give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt. Then again, everybody falls into their biases. And sometimes I don't give people the benefit of the doubt. If you've proven me wrong once or twice, sure. And Jack Posobiec has said some wild crap before. But to just instantly I don't want to say take it out of context, because they did give pretty good context. They gave almost the entire quote, which is more than some MSNBC channel hosts actually did. But then to kind of falsify what was going on around it, or to not include the fact that he is a troll character, so maybe he was making troll comments, I think those are all very important. Maybe what he said is 100% true. And if that's 100% what he's saying, that we need to end democracy and bring in a theocracy, hey, I am right there with you. I just don't believe that's actually what he said. He's a troll. He is out there trying to be provocative. He is a provocateur, okay? And this author definitely has their opinions. They definitely have their set in stone opinions, just like I do. I have some set in stone opinions where I don't necessarily give people benefit of the doubt either. So I can't pretend that I'm not out here being a hypocrite by saying, oh, hey, you have to be 100% open-minded all the time. That's not 100% fair. I just think they're wrong. I just think that they should, in this case, give them the benefit of the doubt, rather than trying to say, at the end of the day, this movement is 100% wrong. Everything they stand for is evil. Sure, there are some things that you could definitely, within this list, say, yeah, there's a lot of people that believe that on that side. And then you could go through each one and say, I don't know if that's everybody. There's certain segments that are separate here. And to pretend as though they are all the same, pretend as though that this entire movement is evil because of all these different things, and to also drag in the Tea Party, which I've said 3 times now, was a fiscally conservative movement bloc in order to counteract Obama. Yeah, it's not in good faith, in my opinion. Also, when trying to say dark money corruption, that's both sides nowadays. To pretend as though that's just one side, and I hope Common Dreams would probably call it out on the liberal side too, knowing most of their authors. But come on. If you're trying to describe the trend of one side and only attribute it to them, that's unfair. If I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt and saying that you're ascribing it to them and you would also ascribe it to the progressives, great, call it out. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's something that you need to put in a description of a MAGA-only rant that you're doing at the beginning of your article. But hey, I've been all over the place on this one. My point being, obviously, we are at each other's throats, and we need to, at the end of the day, give each other the benefit of the doubt, rather than taking comments which could have been made in jest and using them as the knives that we shove into each other's stomachs, and then we watch each other bleed out as our nation is lost to us because we're infighting. Maybe we should take that approach. But hey, that's just me. Maybe that's actually reconciling, and not constantly cutting in front of each other and trying to step on each other's toes is the way to move forward and to unite. Maybe that's the way that we should do it, but no, that's just not how it works. All right, so let's jump to our last article. It'll be a really quick one. It comes from The Hill. Truth Social merger approved, giving Trump potential source of cash. And you may be thinking, oh, well, there you go. He's going to have his bond. How much is this going to be worth? Quote, teeing up its stock market debut, a potential $3.5 billion windfall for Donald Trump is coming. So with this deal, he would own about 60% of the company, therefore giving him control over almost all of the voting, because 60% of the voting shares basically means he can control everything. But also, it means it's going to have to be that he can't sell anything, because the nature of this debut is that he would have to disclose when he starts selling stock in order to actually get the cash for it. So he's not actually going to be able to pay off his bond or pay off any of the civil suit penalties, which is $539 million, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. It's somewhere around $500 million. So for those that are saying, oh, well, here's a windfall of $3.5 billion, he can pay off that no problem with cash now. He's going to be a little bit more liquid. No, it's caught up in stock. and he can't sell any of it without disclosing all of it first, which could also send the price down, meaning that as he's selling it, it could be worth less money, and then he would have to sell more in order to get the current amount that he needs to pay off that civil penalty. And then guess what? He may not own 60%. He may still be the largest single shareholder, but if everybody else was to buy up shares, like maybe BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and the people that may not necessarily like him could buy up 51% of the board because he sold so much in order to pay off his civil penalty, and then he wouldn't have control of his company. So I don't see him doing this. One, because it's going to be hard, and the disclosures, I believe, have to be 3 months ahead when he could sell it, and he needs it now. He couldn't just sell it right now anyway. But also, he would be giving up a controlling share of the company, which I don't think he would want to do. So, just an interesting article for sure. Keep it in your mind. Yeah, Truth Social, even though it's a company that basically only exists to put his message out there, it's somehow doing okay, and it's somehow worth $3.5 billion to him. Now, let's be clear. That's only what he has, which is 60%. So if we divide 3.5 divide it by 0.6, then the rough valuation of Truth Social is $5.83 billion. I mean, that's pretty good for a company that basically just exists to talk to his supporters. I don't know how it has that evaluation. I really don't get it, but whatever, hey, good for him. And this merger is going to make him a little bit of money. It just might be a little too late to serve his current purposes. But hey, we got that out of the way. Let's jump into something a little bit more delightful. Let's jump to our daily delight. And this one also comes from Parade Pets. If you haven't noticed, there is most definitely a trend here. Parade Pets is one of the cutest sites, and I like to end on a little bit of cuteness. We need to end on a little bit of positivity. No matter how much it makes me emasculated, I don't care, because with all this politics stuff, it's always dreary and sad, and we need something to pick us up. Today, we have two little pugs who are getting baths, some of their first ever. Quote, "It can be difficult to give your dog a bath at home. Whether they like it or hate it, it doesn't simplify the task. And it's even more complicated when there are two. Even if they are small, that doesn't always make it easier. Watch this video from March 9th to see two tiny pugs getting all cleaned up." And if you want to see the video or any of the cute photos from that article, or you want to read any of today's articles, there'll be a link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, which I'm pretty sure is extinct now, but I'm going to keep saying it until I get 100% verification on that one, as well as Podvine. And if you want to check out the Twitter handle, it's @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. 10-minute short-form content that kind of just explores random topics that I'm thinking of, books that I'm reading, different ideas, not as formal, not as structured. Sometimes talk about the morality of certain actions that YouTube doesn't like me saying the words of, so we're just going to skip on the actual words. It may begin with an S and end with a side, but hey, it is what it is. And then there's other topics where we just talk about the nature of the universe, the nature of human existence, and just different points of view that I'm reading about. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.